everyone, welcome to the Dreamer's Edge podcast.
I'm Nicholas. I write video games review for thedreamersedge.com.
And I'm Dimitri. I write movie reviews for thedreamersedge.com. I'm also its webmasters, and we are your hosts today. And we have a concept coming out just for the month of February called Why the Hate? You know, when you go see a movie you anticipate and you come out just angry at it because it was so bad. Is it really that the movie's so bad? Or is it just that your expectations were too high and you're just disappointed?
Yeah.
So we're going to do something a little bit peculiar. What we're going to do is we're going to try to jumpstart some of our memories. I'm going to try to bring up some movies that Nick really hates and sort of challenge him as to whether he was disappointed or he really hated it. And he's going to do the same with me.
All right.
In fact, why don't you get us started, Nick?
All right. First movie for you that I know you disliked a lot, The Bourne Supremacy.
Yes, The Bourne Supremacy. Now, the thing is, I love The Bourne Identity. Love it! And when I heard that they were going to make a sequel of Bourne Supremacy, I was like all into it. The love interest from the first movie is there in the trailer, so I'm like, alright, they're going to continue the story. All the actors are back, and everybody's going gaga over Paul Greengrass, a new director, doing it and saying that he did an amazing job. I went to see it with you, Nick, if you remember. And I came out like so angry. I'm like, the thing that bugged me about it, though, it was like, okay, first of all, I didn't get to see the movie. I got to see a blur, which I assume is the movie. Because that camera would not stop moving. It bugged me so much. And the thing about it is, why it bugged me is because I thought the action in The Bourne Identity had a unique flavor to it. A sort of distance that is not in any other movie. Because it's as if Bourne, the Matt Damon character, is also sort of watching himself from the outside because he doesn't know who he is. So the action is filmed in such a distant way that it's just sort of happening mechanically. And then he stops and goes like, oh, I just did that. You know? And that made it so cool. And then the Paul Greengrass thing of getting you into the action sort of goes against that concept. You're not supposed to be into the action. You're supposed to be witness to the awesomeness that is Bourne.
Yeah.
So like that bugged me to know. And of course they killed the love interest from the first movie like in the first 15 minutes. And I was like, what?
I think it's in the first 5 minutes, honestly.
Oh, no. That changes everything.
But, I hadn't seen the first one, so I went to see that one with you. I didn't think it was a great movie. I was kind of disappointed not being able to see the action. Because, I don't have a PG in following shaky cam action. It was kind of giving me a headache, to be honest. But I didn't really think it was that bad. I thought it was weird they killed a character at the beginning like that. I was like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to care or something. But I didn't think it was that awful.
No? I know I hate that movie. But now you're asking me whether or not I was just disappointed or I still hate the movie. And I haven't seen it since.
Okay.
But I will say this. I've seen The Bourne Ultimatum with my expectations adjusted, because it's still Paul Greengrass. It's a continuation of The Bourne Supremacy. So I went to see it with that eye. And I still don't think it's a good movie, but I will confess that I didn't hate it nearly as much. And I suspect that it's about at the same level. It's just that because my expectations were adjusted, I was like, yeah, it's a movie,
And to just go back on that quickly, I saw the first one after having seen the second one, and I'm disappointed like in reverse. I was like,
you're retroactively disappointed.
Exactly, It's like after seeing the first one and just thinking back the second one, I was like, wow, that was crap.
I mean, like, the thing with the Bourne Supremacy as well, like, nothing can get around that really awful ending with the Bourne Supremacy, where it turns out that, spoiler alert, people, it's a pretty old movie, but it ends with, him creating all this carnage so he can apologize to some widow about killing her husband, and it's like, but in Collateral Damage, like, that's 17 lives you just took to do that. Like, are you going to keep apologizing and the more and more? It's sort of like it's just a never-ending cycle.
Eventually, there won't be enough people to kill, so he'll just be able to apologize, and that's it.
That's true. It's just such a preposterous ending and sort of also pretentious a little bit. It's like, oh, we're about character. It's about his guilt. And it's like, well, if it's about his guilt, you can't have him kill everybody in a way. It's like very badly designed ending and just pissed me off. And that, I don't think we can get around that,
That's a good point.
So I'm going to say still a bad movie, in my opinion.
Okay.
Star Wars Episode 1. I know you dislike it quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about your experience watching that for the first time.
Well, actually, when it was out, fresh in the theaters, it was a great movie, and the special effects were great. Okay, you had to suffer through Jar Jar and the kid, but if you ignore those, the rest of the movie I thought was awesome. It was special effects. The pod race was really cool. The lightsaber fight was great. It was a lot less static than in the previous one. I thought it was a very good movie.
Oh.
And then, then the second one comes out, and it's like, wow, this second movie doesn't make sense, and it kind of forces you to revisit the first one a little bit, and you start seeing things that don't make sense in the first one as well. And then the third one comes out, and you're revisiting both movies, and you're like, wow, this whole trilogy doesn't make sense at all. And I was unfortunate also to watch the Plinkett review, which started pointing out even more things that don't make sense in the episode one. And then you go back and it's like, well, this whole movie from the first minute does not make sense at all. And yeah, it's a bad movie. So this is actually a case of, it met my expectations, but I just learned and it's like, wow, no, this is a horrible movie. And, it is very bad. It's a bad movie in itself, but when you compare it to episodes 4, 5, and 6 now, yeah, it's even worse.
The thing is, it doesn't live up to the original trilogy, and which is not exactly true for me, actually. I still like Episode 1. I still defend Episode 1. I think Episode 1 is a fun movie. I like it more than Return of the Jedi, I'll freely confess.
Really?
I do believe that it was always going to disappoint people because it doesn't match our memory of the original trilogy.
Okay.
Because if you rewatch the original trilogy from an adult's eye and not a kid's eye,
Yeah.
you go like, wow, there's a lot of goofiness in this. Like, there's a lot of like, well, that plot thread petered out, It's like, there is another one. Really? There's another Jedi? Oh my god! Oh, it's Leia. Oh, she doesn't do anything with her powers. Oh, what was the point of that? Nothing. But we tend to gloss over that when we remember the trilogy. We tend to remember it as this perfect creature.
Yeah.
So it was always going to disappoint people, but I actually think, first of all, it's got a lot of great ideas in it. They're sort of put together in a hodgepodgey kind of way that
Yeah.
the plot doesn't really work that well. But like the idea of traveling across a planet and meeting different creatures in that planet while trying to get out of the Trade Federation's pursuit or whatever the hell they were trying to achieve there.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
well, no, actually. But the idea of that adventure is fun. The fact that you don't really care what the adventure is motivated by
Yeah.
could be a problem only if you don't look at it as an odyssey. Where the idea is just to see these cool characters sort of go from one point to the other, to the other, to the other, and have a good time. Sort of like, the Odyssey. Sort of like Ulysses the Odyssey.
Yeah.
The point of his journey sort of gets forgotten halfway through that epic. Jar Jar is fine if they had just dropped him, after 20 minutes. That would have been fine,
Yeah.
And all of that. And the thing is, the individual scenes are super cool.
Yeah, that I will give. That's why I loved the movie when it came out. The scenes were really, really cool. But when you step back from the special effects, it's like, no, this is a bad story. This doesn't work for me, really.
Yeah, so you'd say bad movie, definitely?
Yeah, which is like surprising. It's completely the opposite of what this podcast is supposed to be. It was a great movie, but then when you think about it, no, it's a bad movie.
That's true, right? This was a bad example. Oh,
But-
sorry about that, guys.
It's a bad example, but I mean, it is an example of people talking about huge disappointments. And is it really a bad movie, or is it a disappointment? That's for each and everybody to think. But it is the typical example of like the disappointment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right. So for you, movie Predator.
Predator. Yeah, Predator's a funny story. Like, obviously, I don't remember what it was like watching Predator for the first time as a kid. It was too long ago, and I had other preoccupations, such as catching G.I. Joe at the right time. But I rewatched it as an adult, and here's the thing. Everybody loves Predator. Predator is a very fondly remembered movie, and I remember liking it as a kid. I remember thinking it was badass.
Yeah.
So I bought the DVD thinking, yeah, that movie was awesome, and I watched it. And it was the first time, like, something like 15 years. It was like, this is awful. It's just so bad. It's misogynistic. It's so empty,
Well, it's tough guys being tough in the jungle.
Yeah, that is what that is.
People like that.
But like, but to go all the way to the fact that like, oh, you're a woman, you will not handle a gun, and will not be part of this mighty fight. I'm like, oh, come on.
Well, wasn't they didn't trust her as well? But
Yeah, but the sort of the thematics in it are pretty obvious. Like,
Okay.
war is a manly thing, you know.
I guess.
And it's just so empty. It's like there's no substance in this thing. I was so bored.
Could it be because back then it was like Arnold being himself, which was kind of like a novel thing? It was a rare thing, and they were being tough guys. And now this type of movies has been done like hundreds and hundreds of times. So you're just watching it, seeing, I've seen this.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, that might be the case. I think also one of the issues also is that it's a product of its time. You know what I mean? Like it didn't age well, but back in the '80s, those sort of values, bigger is better, which applies to apparently muscle and violence and Predator,
Okay.
was a value that we actually embraced back then, even as children. And of course, that's not really where we went culturally. That's not really who we are now, and maybe that's the thing. Like maybe I'm looking at it forgetting that it's just a product of its time.
Okay. So a lesson to the audience. Basically, if you have a fond memory of a movie of when you were a kid, it might not hold up.
Yes, that's right. There's a reason why Chris refuses to watch YouTube videos of Thundar the Barbarian, because he knows that thing ain't gonna hold up. Pulp Fiction is a movie that I know you dislike.
Oh God, I hated it.
Yeah?
And it probably added by the fact that before I hadn't seen it, and people kept saying, "Oh, I mean, Tarantino is the greatest director in the history of sliced bread," and
Because the history of sliced bread is filled with directors of all kinds.
something like that.
Yes.
And Pulp Fiction is the best movie ever, and you have to see it. It's such an experience because Tarantino's a genius. And I watch it, and it's just a bunch of criminals swearing at each other, and that's what I got from that movie. That was just a horrible, horrible watching experience. It was bad. And I was like, I came out of that and I was like, what did I get from this? I mean, people swear. That's what I got from this. And criminals are assholes. That's pretty much what I got from it.
Well, it is a vacuum of a movie, but I mean deliberately so. I am actually quite fond of Pulp Fiction. I think it's very funny, but part of the joke is that it leads absolutely nowhere. It's a vacuum. It's sort of built like a tornado. It circles around something, and then you get to the center, and it's just it's emptiness. That's what it is.
Okay. And that was the point of him making it like that, or was it just
Yeah,
that's what happened?
I mean, it's called Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
It's about embracing the pulp tradition, and the pulp tradition, is sellout stories. It's stories just for entertainment and no value whatsoever, and that's sort
Okay.
of what he did there.
Yeah, I just did not understand people's reaction that this was the greatest movie of all times. It's, I guess, looking back, even just looking back, it's a bad movie for me.
Yeah?
It's not the kind of movie I would enjoy, but yeah, after watching it, after everybody's recommendation, I was really angry, and it's like, this is 2 hours of my life. I'm never gonna,
Oh wow!
I'm never gonna get again. And you're talking to a guy that plays video games like 4 hours a day, and I was pissed that I wasted 2 hours of my time watching this.
I don't know, man. The thing about Pulp Fiction is, whether or not you can enjoy it on a personal level, because I've watched it like 6, 7 times at this point, and my reaction to it is different every time. Sometimes I like it, sometimes like, oh, just want it to end, which is probably closer to where you were.
Yeah.
And it depends on my mood, but one thing that I can never deny is, it changed cinema back then. There was no movie like this
Yeah.
before, and suddenly there are movies like that being done all the time.
Movies which I don't like, so I guess.
I guess so. All right, let's move on.
All right. For you, a movie I remember seeing with you because we didn't know what to go watch and we didn't know what to do. So let's go and give this a shot. And you kind of hated it. Deep Impact.
I kind of hated it a lot. And now, while we're classifying this into disappointment, it's what you have to understand is back when Deep Impact came out, there were 2 Meteorite movies that were coming out the same summer, essentially.
Yeah.
There was Armageddon, the Michael Bay movie, and Deep Impact, the movie with Morgan Freeman in it. You see the commercials for both in the spring, and you go, okay, Armageddon's going to be the dumb action you want, and Deep Impact's going to be like the thoughtful interpretation of that subject. So I went into Deep Impact going like, we're gonna get some good character beats. We're gonna get some genuine thought as to how this would affect a culture, a society, the world, and even single individuals. And I went into it, and it was just like manipulative tripe. You know, it was.
Please explain.
It's like you have like at one point like this mother who, because the meteorite's about to fall, and they've decided to allow people to go into the mega bunker by having a lottery. And some people are chosen, and some people are not chosen. Like by lottery, they use the social security number, if I remember. Yeah, you don't actually have to buy a ticket,
and you don't get stoned. So
yeah. So there's this woman. She has a child. Her child was picked by the lottery, but she was not.
Yeah.
And she refuses to let go of her child, and so one of the heroines has to give up her seat so that the woman and her child can go. I understand that that's a reaction that can happen from a mother, but it's pretty rare. You know what I mean? Like most people would be like, "Take my child," you know. That's most normal mothers, and just for the record, that's most normal mothers worthy to continue existing after a meteorite hits the Earth.
Yeah.
So this whole scene was already putting me off. It was like, okay, well, what are the chances that you'd hit that mom? And what are the chances that you'd hit that mom and you'd hit like her colleague who is the nicest woman on earth, who goes like, yeah, you can live. I mean, you're a complete bitch and you're willing to kill your kid because you can't live, but your life is more important than mine.
Yeah. Actually, I think they were just the kid didn't get picked. They were just using the helicopter to fly to safety.
Oh, they.
And then they were going to get one of the reporter that got selected for the lottery. They were going to get people to safety and then her to the bunker. And there wasn't room for the lady, but they said, "Give us our kid. We'll get your kid at least to safety." And she was like, "No, don't take." So it's pretty much what you said, but it was really like your kid before you, lady. I remember that, and it's like.
And of course, you're supposed to cry at the big sacrifice from Tia Leone's character, who's sacrificing herself. And all I'm going like this is going like, what are the chances? This is stupid. You know?
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, the Elijah Wood subplot. And that one's the worst, because he's the kid who found the meteorite first. So, he bypassed the lottery. His family gets into the mega bunker.
Yeah.
But his neighbor doesn't. And his neighbor is Lily Sobieski. And I will admit that if I were a 15, 16-year-old kid and my neighbor was Lily Sobieski, I would try to save her too.
Yeah.
But the family gets to the bunker and he goes like, "No, I'm going to save my neighbor girl because I love her." And the dad's going like, "All right, we'll wait for you in the bunker. Here's my Rolex." Like, excuse me, what?
I know.
There's so many levels of wrong with that scene where it's like, okay, as a parent, there is no parent on earth that's going to let a 15-year-old, he's still a kid, sacrifice his life or risk his life to go save the neighbor girl. Nobody does that. You drag the kid kicking and screaming. If you're the sort of self-sacrificing parent who values this, you might go in his stead to find the neighbor girl. Or worse comes to worse, if you're like really, really sort of like a progressive parent, you might go with the kid.
Yeah.
But you do not let your kid go alone and go like, "Here's your Rolex." Not because, first of all, the Rolex is really going to help you in the post-apocalypse,
Yeah. Well, you need to know time.
It's like really important. It's my head exploded at that time. It's like boop.
Okay.
And then he finds a neighbor girl, and then they have a baby that they save as well. And first of all, then the meteor crashes, and like that. First of all, the baby's head should have exploded just from the shockwave, but it's like none of it looked real at that point. It was like, that is not what would happen at all. And so I was sitting there and I was just like, I was expecting the smart movie about meteorite. And I was getting a version that's just as dumb as the Michael Bay movie. In fact, the Michael Bay movie is slightly less dumb because it doesn't take itself so seriously.
That's true.
So is it more that I was disappointed? Yeah, I think that's one of those cases where the movie is probably just mediocre, not worth hating. But my expectations for a certain level of intelligence was so high on this movie that I was just like, no.
Yeah, I was just expecting, a big impact and seeing cool special effects. I'm not usually in those kinds of movies, but, I figured, let's go see this one. It's going to be cool. So I was fine with the movie.
I am going to call poppycock on this one.
Yeah.
I am going to call poppycock this one because I turn around to you at one of the moments I felt were manipulative.
Yeah.
And like turn around to you to make a snarky comment, and I was seeing you, and you had tears in your eyes.
I did not have
man.
tears.
You
I'm
were
not the kind
blubbering.
No, I was not blubbering. I'm not the kind of person to have tears. But again, because I was not expecting any kind of, seriousness about it, and I was just expecting immediate fall and okay, movie over. I was expecting to be it more kind of like Armageddon about how they would get rid of the comet, which was actually a comet. So yeah, I was kind of caught in the oh wow, they're actually trying to put emotions there. So yeah, it kind of got me off guard there. So you're expecting a 10 and you got a 5. I'm expecting a 0 and I got a 5.
Fair enough. All right. Let's move on to our next one. A little modern thing. Let's go back into space. We talked about Star Wars Episode 1. Let's talk about Star Trek Episode 1, essentially. Yeah. The new Star Trek movie, the J.J. Abrams reboot movie. I watched it with you, and I know you disliked it.
Yeah, because I was expecting a Star Trek movie. Star Trek was never about super action, especially Next Generation. It was always about the technology and, them solving problems with the technology and a different situation that arise. And this movie felt a lot more like, an action movie. It felt more like Transformers in space, for example. It really felt empty, and the science department was just about all action. They wanted to make it so action that phasers made bullet sounds. It was so actiony, and I didn't like that. That's not to me. That's not Star Trek.
Yeah, there's a certain dynamic feel to it, but I do feel it's a lot about the characters. It's Kirk and Spock. It's how they feel about their parents and the legacy that they've been left with.
Okay.
Which works as a nice metaphor to also, the idea of rebooting a Star Trek franchise. Because Kirk is essentially going through the same thing the filmmakers are. He has this sort of amazing legacy ahead of him that's pretty much mapped out for him, either by time travel or destiny, or just the fact that he has a father that was just this amazing, captain.
Yeah.
And he's sort of like, but I sort of want to do my own thing. And I thought that was kind of a clever thing, and I think the whole idea of Star Trek back in the day, the old Star Trek, not the new Star Trek. The Next Generation Star Trek was all about science is going to make the world better. That's what it was about. But the old Star Trek, it still touched on the science, but it was more about the idea that don't let anything get in the way of what you can achieve. Boldly go where no one's gone before. And J.J. Abrams sort of took that premise and went like, okay, well, now that they've boldly gone where no one else has gone before, what's left to do in terms of boldly going? And what he went with is like, well, don't let anyone stop you, but don't let even yourself stop you. And that's really what was going on in Star Trek. Their biggest enemies were themselves in a way. Spock, his ambivalence towards his human side, and Kirk, his ambivalence towards, how he grew up and how he's supposed to live up to his heritage.
Yeah.
Their insecurities, in other words. So I thought that was really, really clever. I think it's actually an excellent movie in terms of character beats. I don't think it's an action movie is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I did not... For Star Trek, I don't go that deep into interpretation, honestly, because it's Star Trek. Honestly, just when I watched it, and it really felt, super actiony, and I need to teleport, so I'm going to run through the corridors instead of taking the turbo lift, which would take you there immediately. I didn't get that, but he needs to run. He needs to run. I was like, okay, that's a little much. It really felt like they needed to push the action and make it super, super fun. But when I watched it, I didn't like it because it wasn't Star Trek. But looking back, I mean, it is a good movie. It was just not what I was expecting. But if you look at it, and saying, okay, just take the movie for what it is, and just watch and enjoy it, and forget that it's called Star Trek. Just call it whatever. Trek in space, and perfectly fine movie. Honestly, I was just very disappointed when I saw it the first time.
It's sort of the attachment to the franchise that sort of warped your view of it.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I'll just point out, you said that the turbo lift would go faster.
Yeah.
I don't know, if it's a turbo lift from Star Trek 5, it might take him to the 52nd floor, the 28th floor, the 13th floor, the 78th floor, the 52nd floor again. It might take a while, is what I'm saying.
A movie I didn't see, but you said were very disappointed in it. Young Adults.
Oh boy, did I react badly to that movie. This movie is directed by Jason Reitman, who did Up in the Air and Juno and Thank You for Smoking.
Okay.
3 movies that I absolutely adore.
All right.
These movies are brilliant. And it's written by Diablo Cody, for whom I have a lot of the time. She wrote Juno and Jennifer's Body.
Okay.
She's a screenwriter who has sort of a very unique flavor to the way the characters talk. And so they reunited after Juno to do Young Adult. And I was like, oh my god, I have to see this movie. And so I went to see this movie with my girlfriend. And I was all jazzed about it. It's like the most depressing thing ever. And it was just, it's such an angry movie. And it's like, and I was so uncomfortable with it because it touched on some points that I didn't really want to deal with at that particular time. And I came out going like, oh, this is so awful. I'm traumatized by this terrible movie. And for me, this is a perfect example of like, that was totally about my expectations.
Okay.
These 2 creators, this director and this writer, they're known for having a certain upbeatness mixed with satire in it. And here they did, a much more downbeat movie, and I did not see that coming in, and I was not in the mood to see a downbeat movie,
Okay.
And it touched on issues, like I said, it touched on issues I didn't really want to deal with at the time. So it's like it was all about my mood. It had nothing to do with the movie. If I stop and think about it, this is a pretty good movie because the fact that it dealt with issues that I could relate to and then haunted me enough that I rejected the movie means that to some degree, artistically speaking, it is effective.
Okay.
I would probably argue that this is probably a great movie that I happen to hate because I saw it at the wrong time.
I see. Like if you see Alive on a plane,
Exactly.
So it's not even it's like an okay movie that you had too much. It's a good movie. It's just like a high expectation and bad circumstances, like a combo of both.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible.
Let's see. What do I want to ask you about Spider-Man 3?
Oh wow, I hated that movie.
Yeah.
Just seeing it, I enjoyed Spider-Man, the original one. The second one I thought was even better, Doctor Octopus. And going in there, I knew they were going to do Venom, and which is the comic book character I really love, one of my favorite villains from the Spider-Man series. And okay, there's going to be Sandman too. All right, fine, 2 villains. It's the third one. You have to make it bigger. But then you go in there and they added the new Green Goblin as well, and it's just there's so much stuff happening that whatever character development happens in the movie seems so superficial, and it seems also to kind of undo what they did in the first ones. I came out there going like, wow, that was bad. But looking back, it's not a good movie. Is it as bad as I felt it was? Maybe not. It's a comic book story. And I guess, especially at that time, the standard had gone way low on comic book stories. So, following that vein, I could see it being, a mediocre movie, but not in the way I hated it when I walked out of there.
Oh, it's hard for me to defend that movie because it's a silly movie. It's a very silly and clumsy movie. But I will say, I saw it and I came out going like, that wasn't very good. Like, I wasn't angry or anything. I just kind of like, that sort of failed.
You had the right word there. It's a silly movie. Yeah. And if I had gone there, thinking like you're going to see a silly movie, I probably would have been fine with it. But I was expecting something, in the same ballpark as Spider-Man 1 and 2, and seeing this, you're like, oh my god, this is horrible.
The weird thing about that movie, though? I think it invites that sort of anger from disappointment, because it's not immediately bad. It starts off okay, and then just gets progressively worse and worse. And it's the weirdest thing.
I know.
Because, when, Ninja Turtle Goblin shows up, James Franco...
Yeah.
with his, magic surfboard from Highlander 2. I'm actually, I'm watching this and I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. That fight is really good.
That's true. I will give him that. That was a good fight. Yeah.
And then you think, and that's the opening fight? And it's gonna escalate from here? This is gonna be awesome!
Yeah.
And then, the next fight is him and the Sandman, I think? And you're like, oh, well, that was less good, but, it's still pretty cool. I guess the Sandman wasn't as compelling a character as Ninja Turtle Goblin because he doesn't have that emotional connection, so I'll give it a chance. And then Venom shows up and I was like, that was kind of clumsy, but maybe when they put them all together, and then they put them all together, it's just a giant mess.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head there. That's pretty much it. I mean, the first fight really set the tone, and he's not only trying to fight the goblin, he's trying to save a wedding ring at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then I was like, okay. He's like, ugh.
Oh, and then Peter Parker and Mary Jane just get progressively whinier and more obnoxious. It's like the reverse of romantic comedy. Like a romantic comedy, they start off like really sort of hating each other and having these idiosyncrasy that make you want to strangle them just a little bit. But they learn to evolve and grow, and by the end you're sort of rooting for them to be together because they change into moderately likable people. Yeah. Like Peter Parker and Mary Jane start off, it's like, I remember from the previous movies, they're okay people, I'm rooting for them. And by the end of it, you're like, you know what? Why don't you just sleep with another guy and you go elsewhere and get another girl? I'm done with this couple.
Yeah. I was, when the Green Goblin broke them up, I was like, it's about time.
I was rooting for the Green Goblin to hook up with Mary Jane. It was like, hey, man, it looks like a more productive couple.
Too bad his follow plan was to eat pie. That was it. And when, I don't know, people hate when he had the black suit and he was like walking around like a dork, and, being like more and more jackassy, apparently. I thought that was hilarious. I was like, this is a brush of fresh air. He's been whiny and whiny and whiny the whole movie. Now he looks like he's having fun. This is great.
I mean, it's sort of out of place in this movie in terms of drama because it's not dramatic at all.
Yeah.
But I will say that there is a funny joke in that scene in the sense that it's like Peter Parker is such inherently a nice guy that even when he's possessed by an evil entity, like he comes off as a mild jerk at best.
Yeah.
Like that's the most evil he can get.
But the thing is, he looked like he was having fun, which is the first time you see Peter Parker having fun in the whole movie. So you're like, yeah, this is good. I like it. I don't get why the symbiote from outer space makes you play piano better, but whatever. If you know, leave a comment.